Hello and welcome to Geek First Sidequest, your weekly stop for video game news, reviews, and more here on the Geek First Podcast Network. I'm your host, the Adam Harcaster, Domas, and I have with me once again the Sindarin speaker, Kirklin Patzer. You have to pay extra to get Kirklin in this episode. How's it going, my friend? How are you doing today?
It's going very well. I'm excited to be here. I was just saying offcast, back-to-back weeks of Sidequest. It's always a fun time. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think not next week, but the week after is Redfall, which once again we don't even know if you're going to be playing that yet at launch.
Yeah.
But
I'm curious if the specs are out. I'll have to compare with my gaming rig right now.
It should be. I mean, the game's
Yeah.
coming out in like a week, which is crazy. A week.
I'll
and
have
a
to look
bit,
into
so
it, compare. Yeah.
check it out. And then, what else is going? I wanted to say this like right off the hop is that I think the next Sidequest might be slightly strange the next little bit here because I think next week is when Star Wars Jedi Survivor comes out, but I think Travis and Taylor want to have a good amount of time with the game. So I don't know when exactly that review will drop, so I think to fill in for that, I think maybe the next like regular week of SideQuest, I might just put up my Zelda rankings then, and then the Star Wars review will follow at some point, and then the week after that will be the Redfall review. So very excited for these next couple weeks before I head off on my trip. A lot of good gaming stuff to do here. Speaking of Redfall, our Arcane retrospective is almost done. Kirkland, isn't that crazy? We have
It's like
one more
bittersweet.
game
It's
to
sad.
record. It is bittersweet. It is very bittersweet. But on Tuesdays when we're recording Prey, so that'll go up on Patreon right away or Wednesday at the latest, and then up on the main feeds probably a few days after that. So I finished Prey again now. I mean, I've done it before, but it's been fun going through that thing again. I'm guessing you're like right near the end, or you finished it.
I've rolled credits actually this
Okay.
weekend. I felt very satisfied with that. But yeah, I'm gonna save my thoughts. I'm very excited to talk
Sounds
to you
good.
guys about that game.
Yeah.
First time for me, so this is a big one.
Mhm. Yeah, and then so for today, we're talking about a few things. One, we're going to just laugh at this stupid thing that's happening in Lord of the Rings Gollum. And then there's three, I mentioned this last week with me and you, that there's three new games coming out. Minecraft Legends, Coffee Talk 2, and then Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp all came out, and I've been playing all of them, so we're going to talk about those three things. But I want to shout this out, too, that I'm guesting on the Super Switch Heads podcast this week to talk about Advance Wars. So I'm going to talk about it here, but I think that'll be more in-depth conversation because those two guys over there will have also played the game, so we can talk more about it, maybe the future of the series and stuff like that, but we'll still talk about it here. I'll drop a link for that, but Super Switch Heads, I've been on there a couple times. This will be my third appearance. They're really good time, always talking with those guys about Nintendo stuff. I'll drop a link. I'll post about it on Twitter, so everyone should go check out that episode as well. Leave a review, please. Really helps a lot over on the SideQuest feed specifically, or just the Geekverse feed, wherever you want to do that. And then, I don't know, I think that's pretty much it. Join our Patreon, get episodes early and ad-free. Kirkland, we just learned this recently, that we have an RSS feed. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, a Patreon, I guess, not a Patreon subscriber, you can essentially pop this special code into your Apple Podcast. Anything except Spotify. Unfortunately, we're looking into figure out what's going on with Spotify. But you can put that in, and then you don't have to listen to the episodes on Patreon. You can listen to them on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to things, but then you get the ad-free version there. So that's a great way to listen to the podcast. So you got to go to Patreon to get access to that. And I think that's pretty much it. Let's get right into it. So, I was prepared for this episode. I'm like, hey, I got these three games to talk about, but it'd be nice if I could throw a couple news topics in there to beef up the episode a little bit. And then I saw this headline, and it just made me chuckle, which is that the Lord of the Rings Gollum, which we've talked about a lot on the podcast because it's been delayed a million times, and so it's like we keep thinking it's almost about to come out, and then it gets pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And also, okay, quick side tangent. Apparently, it's coming out in the end of May now, which I didn't even realize, because me and Taylor talked about Gollum like a month ago, because they did like this big 5-minute like story trailer thing. Maybe it wasn't 5 minutes, but it felt like it. A big story trailer, and then there was no release date, and we were like, what? Why is there no release date at the end of this trailer? And so I guess on Twitter or something, they just dropped the release date because it's now coming out at the tail end of May. So I won't be able to play it at release, but I'm excited to check it out. So quick side tangent on that. But essentially, for Lord of the Rings Gollum, I saw that they are charging extra for a different language. And when I first saw that, I'm like, that's really weird, right? Because if it's like, okay, if it was like French or something, you'd think that, well, the game in French currency would just be more expensive or something weird like that. But no, when you look into it, it's that they have Sindarin, which is like Elvish. And if you want to get Sindarin across the whole game for all the elves and stuff to talk in the game, you have to pay extra for that. So there's a microtransaction to get access to this additional language. And then like in this statement, they're like, there is still Sindari in the base game if you don't pay for this. There is like still some in there, but you got to pay extra if you want everyone to be speaking this thing. And you know, we're in an era where games are nickel and diamond for all sorts of things, costumes, mostly cosmetics like costumes and things like that, but sometimes other more egregious things. But I thought this was especially egregious. And they're like, you know, it was very expensive. It took a lot of work for us to train these these professional voice actors in this language, in this fictional language for this game. And I'm like, this is such a stupid argument. It's like, imagine if this game was like huge and was really popular, and then like this DLC thing, this add-on did so well financially for them that like this became a trend in the industry, and we just got stupid stuff like this where companies were like, you know, Ghost of Tsushima 2, you can get the base game for $60, but if you want to access all the side quests in the game, an extra $10. You know, just like they just break the game down into all these little parts instead of like selling them back to you for like individual features. But I just thought this was especially egregious. But yeah, what did you think when you saw this?
I like chuckled. I thought it was a joke headline or something.
It seems like an April Fool's thing.
Yeah, like it doesn't make sense at all to have like it's a Lord of the Rings game. You have Sindarin elves in there, and they're holding back the actual language that they've already recorded. Like they've already done all of this effort to get them in there. And like you said, like there's already going to be Sindarin spoken in the game, but to get all of the elves speaking Sindarin, like that should just be a menu feature to just like select, I want all the characters to speak Sindarin, not have to pay for it. And yeah, their argument of like, oh yeah, like the real Sindarin speakers are very expensive to come by. They don't fucking pay for them. Like I just feel like that's such a weird argument to make, and it's totally fine if they just had all the elves speaking English in the first place to save on costs, which I mean, like, is that a reason why this game has been delayed so many times because of like finances?
I wonder,
Who knows?
I really wonder. Imagine if it was like, I don't know, it's just essentially like, okay, pay $5. I don't know how much it is, but let's say it's like pay $5 for like 10% more immersion. Like that's pretty much what this translates to. It's so weird. Imagine if it was just like, oh yeah, here's a $2 microtransaction if you want to add a brightness slider to the game. Like it just feels like that to me, which is just so stupid. So I don't think anyone is gonna buy this. Like maybe some Lord of the Rings like really diehard fans, but I feel like the amount of people, like this game has to be really good for people to even justify getting it in the first place. I feel like this game already has an uphill battle, and to like throw this on there, like, and you know, is this gonna be a weird thing too, where like reviewers are gonna have this in the game, so they're gonna be like, oh, this is actually a really cool element of the game. It's like this immersive thing. They have this whole language in there, but it's like, oh, but then that's actually separate, and you have to buy this as like it's such a mess, and it's so just cheesy. I love it though at the same time for how stupid it is.
It's and like I feel like if anyone gets caught into buying it, because it almost feels like a scam type thing, or like trying to trick people, because they're marketing it as like the special edition. This is the precious edition. So if somebody just wants that name attached to the game, then they're paying more for like literally just some extra VO. Like it's so bizarre. Yeah, it kind of made me think of like a similar type of DLC microtransaction thing that Warhammer actually has, but that one is based on adding like blood to the battles, because the game is rated T for teen, but like because if they added all that graphic like just people getting decapitated and blood everywhere, like to get that makes the game M rated. So to bypass that, they ended up making a not like, it can't be free either, because that would just like make it an M rated game. So they charge it like, it's like $3 or something, and then you get like access to the blood and gore feature, which is kind of similar, I guess, but like I ended up just buying it anyways because it was like $3 and I wanted just a bloody battle, but still, yeah, it is a pretty similar type thing, right?
That is also very stupid, and I don't know. I don't know which one's more stupid, that paying for extra blood or paying more for Sindarin.
Hey, they got me, so maybe
they got you.
Yeah, they trapped me.
But I look at this, I'm like, being you are big Lord of the Rings fans, you even bigger fan than me. So you'd think that like we would be like at least interested, like, man, that would actually be really cool to have the Elvish language. But I'm like, no, I'm not paying extra for this when this game already doesn't look very good in the first place. Like, yeah, right.
Yeah, and like your argument there of like the game has to be very good to get people to buy it in the first place, and like if it's just mind-boggling good and people just want to keep supporting it, maybe that's what they ended up doing, like paid more money for just like the Sindarin, because that's almost kind of similarly like how I feel about like the Blood and Gore one that I've spent on Warhammer. Like I have thousands of hours in that game, and it's just like, yeah, I want to just get some blood factors. If I've already played it for like 800 hours, let's see this game with some blood on it. But I don't think I'll ever get there with Gollum. I'm already like kind of on the fence of wanting to get it, and like you said, like I am a big Lord of the Rings fan, so it's just weird like news around this game. Like I want to see a headline be like, oh man, that's so great, like a great news headline attached to Gollum, but I feel like I haven't had that in a very long time. It's just been like delayed. I don't know, certain gameplay trailers that haven't really hit very hard for me, but
yeah,
I mean, we're gonna find out end of May. It is nice that it's coming out soon, at least.
It's true. Yeah, no, I think it actually would be a pretty big thing for the game. I think people would care about that feature. Like that would be a really cool thing, that if they could really sell it as like, man, we brought in these like professional voice actors, we train them how to speak this language for this game. Like that'd be this whole cool thing if it was just like a basic feature of it. But yeah, I wonder whose idea was, whether it was someone in the studio or if it was like WB Games, and in terms of like the publisher overhead and stuff like that, and whatever, maybe just the cost of this game kept going push, which, you know, when you delay a game, obviously that's more and more months that you have to pay the employees of that studio to make that, so the budget increases and all that stuff. So to an extent, I get it. Maybe they're trying to recoup some costs there, but yeah, I wonder whose idea it is. And, you know, to your Warhammer point, once again, like I feel like even that's kind of similar for Civ, where there's so many random little DLCs for those games that are like nickel and diming for little features. But yeah, if it's like a game that you're spending thousands of hours with, sometimes just having one new, you know, country, one new unit, a couple new like unit types and stuff like that can add just a ton of replayability and actually add something to the game. But for something like this, which is probably like, I don't know, I imagine like an 8-hour long single player game that I can't imagine many people are going to need to play through multiple times unless they're like trophy hunting or something like that. I don't know. It just seems especially egregious. So can't wait to see what's going on with that game. I will be picking it up at some point. I just really, once again, I am so just curious about this thing. So I will be checking it out at some point, but
not the Precious Edition.
No, I don't think I'll be getting the Precious Edition. And yeah, so it'll probably be out because I'm gonna get back from my trip like probably a week or two after this game comes out, and then I'm gonna be like going straight to Tears of the Kingdom. I'm not going to Lord of the Rings Gollum first. So I'll talk about it at some point on Sidequest, but you have to wait a bit longer for that one, people, because I don't think you or Travis or Taylor are picking it up.
I'd love to be on that episode if you have no one else to review it with, though.
I will.
I definitely want to hear your thoughts first.
You are the Sindarin speaker, so we'll do that whole episode in Sindarin. That'll be and it'll be paywalled behind Patreon. That's how we can justify it.
I was gonna say, you don't have to pay me for that one. I just want to be a part of it and hear your thoughts.
Oh, that's good. Let's move on. I think we'll start with Minecraft Legends. So I'm gonna bring up just a little video here. So because I don't know, Kirklin, how much do you know about Minecraft Legends? Do you even know what like this game really looks like? Have you seen too much?
Yeah,
of this thing?
I remember from like the initial showcase of it, because it's like the dungeon crawler Minecraft game, right?
That's
totally
Minecraft Dungeons.
So okay, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't
know.
This
is Minecraft Legends. This just came out. It's of course Xbox first party studio, so it's available on Game Pass. Eventually, they're going to get to gameplay in this video. This is from the showcase they did that me and Taylor broke down a while ago. But essentially, it is. I would describe it as an RTS, but it's like a third-person perspective RTS. So you still have your little hero character, and you're cruising around the map, and you're building up a base. Building out the different production buildings, getting resources. As you see, when you put a chest down, you're like gathering all the trees in the area, and then you build up units, build out an army of golems and things like that. And then you have to go wage war against another player, maybe multiple players. That sort of thing. And so it's pretty cool. I've checked it out. I've played maybe a couple hours of it, been starting with the campaign. And just in like Minecraft fashion, this does have like full co-op features and stuff, which is something I really like, that, the original Minecraft, a game I've spent a ton of time with single player, but also a ton of time co-op playing with friends. It's such a great experience that way. And I like that Minecraft Dungeons embrace that co-op nature. And so is Minecraft Legends, although I haven't played Legends in co-op yet. Just because I don't know. I feel like the hype isn't really there for this game, and I don't have any friends who are like interested in this thing and wanted to check it out. So instead, I just ended up playing it on my own. But you can kind of get a vibe of what's going on here. And Yeah, so obviously in Minecraft, when you're building in the basic game, it's block by block. It takes a while, and creative mode can speed it up. But in this, it's like much quicker. Like to put a wall down, you essentially just click and drag, and then it builds like this big, huge wall. And you'll just put down a structure, and then it will like build it up in a very RTS sort of way. And you're moving around the map. So you have a unit, and you can attack and stuff like that. But you're mostly supposed to be the commander, building up this army, waging war on it, and all that stuff. So it's kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah, absolutely. This looks really cool. It's kind of interesting, like a third-person RTS, where you just like select the one character, but you're still managing a kingdom with multiple units. It's a very interesting concept that I can't really think of any other games that's done that. But just like seeing them build up like the castles and stuff and their different bases, it's the more macro level of Minecraft with that, like with keeping it as the Minecraft feel too, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it is kind of creating some new units and stuff that I don't remember from the original game too. So I feel like they are kind of getting creative with it. But you can see like one of the bases that this person made is essentially like just this huge maze around the outside of their base.
Really
so it
cool.
takes a bit longer. So that's a cool thing. So I feel like there is a lot of different strategies you can do. And I don't know. I feel like it does take a while before it builds up. Like even in the campaign that I was playing, which is pretty cool. It's actually like a huge map, and then you're going and taking out different bases and stuff like that. And there's almost like it is campaign mode, and it truly does feel like that. It's not just like, okay, here's a small little battle, go fight this one unit, and then you move on to the next map. Like it's just this one huge map that you're kind of slowly exploring more of, or you got to go back and defend your base, go like free this village and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool in the way it's structured. And I think, the third personness of it, like it's pretty zoomed out third person, because obviously it is an RTS, but it's obviously a lot more zoomed in than you would normally expect for something like Command and Conquer or StarCraft or that kind of thing. But I think it probably makes it a bit easier for people to jump in, which makes sense considering that Minecraft is largely a brand and games that kids are interested in. So I think this may be a good, like, kids first RTS sort of game in that way. And I can't speak on the complexity of it, like the later game stuff, since I haven't gotten there yet. But in terms of like that basic nature of it, it's pretty simple. And I think, one thing, it seems like this cranks up as the game goes on, but in the whole section I played, I could only get up to 20 units. Like I could only create 20 golems, and I had like 3 or 4 different types that I could mix and match my type. Some of them were better at destroying buildings, some of them were better at fighting units and things like that. And I hope that really cranks up, because that number did feel very small to me. And even in just this video later on, like I can see that number gets up to like 60, and I'm curious what the maximum amount of units you can have is on your team at a time. But yeah, that's something I'm definitely curious to see more. But truthfully, I don't know how much more of it I will play. I think I'll go like a couple more sessions or something like that. I'd be down for some co-op at some point. But yeah, it's an interesting game, and I don't know. I'm curious to see like what the popularity of it is, how much people are talking about it, how much it lasts. This is also a very busy time with other games coming out, so I don't know if it's going to get brushed under the rug at all. Any questions based on like seeing the gameplay here, things you're curious about when you see it?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking of like the day and night cycle that Minecraft always has. Like, does that introduce different enemies that are just like spawning like how it does in regular Minecraft?
That's a good question, and I don't have an answer for you yet, because definitely in the campaign I was playing through, like it definitely did progress through day and night, but I didn't notice any different units yet. I know you're right. There is like some like those nightmares or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Or I mean, like obviously skeletons and creepers and stuff like that only spawn at night. And obviously part of the Minecraft name is going into mine shafts and stuff. Like I don't think that's an element of this game. So it's all in the overworld. So I'm guessing almost all the units are just accessible like 24 hours a day. Since obviously normally you'd go underground, and enemies can always be underground because there's no daylight and all that stuff. But I'm guessing they had to kind of make some slight adjustments because of the nature of this game.
Right. Is there like different like game modes and stuff? Because such a great element of RTS games, and particular, Warcraft 3 spawned like Dota from just custom games, people getting creative of like, this seems like it's got tower defense written all over it too, of like a custom mode in that aspect. Do they have that, or is it just kind of the campaigns with the online multiplayer and all that stuff?
I'm guessing it seems like you can really only change the stat things of like, okay, this is how, like, choose the size of the map and maybe how many enemy bases or stuff like that there
Okay.
is. But I don't know if you can really change like too much customization beyond that. One thing I did see that seemed pretty interesting was that there's like a monthly or maybe it was weekly, like I guess a created side quest. Like it's some new
Mm,
temporary type of quest that will probably have some very specific type of goal to it, or you got to play in a very specific way.
yeah.
So it seems like through that they're kind of creating just some long-term gameplay elements of like keep come back, check out like the monthly challenge, that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, I don't even know like how long one match is supposed to take because once again, playing through the campaign where it's just this larger map that you're slowly taking over like parts and areas of the map and going on doing these almost like what feel like little side quests.
Yep.
Whereas I feel like if you were to do a 1v1 battle against someone, and maybe it would be like a 45-hour long like just intense battle where it's kind of that
Right.
one-on-one, and maybe you could build up new bases and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
to
curious
see
if
more
they
of
just
that.
give more tools to like the player, because I feel like that is something that would really bring longevity to the title. People just have it's almost like the it's almost like the Mario Maker sort of aspect, how
Mm-hmm.
you could play that game forever because people will just keep making new levels and aspects to that. But yeah, I'm curious just the popularity of this, because I feel like I've heard the term, but obviously I thought it was Minecraft Dungeons. I was thinking of something completely different. So I don't know if that's just the marketing aspect to it, or maybe just not a lot of people that I converse with on my day to day are playing this. I mean, clearly you are, but
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen like a gameplay for it until right now. But a lot of stuff in here looks really really interesting. Is like the crafting like overwhelming with how many options that you have? Because something that I've always been kind of overwhelmed with in Minecraft, they have made it a lot easier since that original release, but I just like would always forget what the recipes are for some things, you
Yeah.
know, like I would always have to have a reference available. But is that the
Mm-hmm.
same here, or is there certain things that are unlocked as you, I don't know if there's a leveling system, but you know RTSs usually have that.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's like a crafting grid in the way that like
Mm.
standard Minecraft does with like a crafting bench. Instead, you're just unlocking like the different buildings and then you just have access to them. Is the way it works. So I think in that way it's actually like a maybe a good improvement of you don't need to have that wiki up, which I think that could be a
Yeah.
very much a mess for
Oh
this like
yeah.
multiplayer uh competitive game is obviously it's like, oh, I don't even know what the recipe is for this kind of thing. So it seems like it opens up very slowly because even in like the couple hours I played, I feel like I hadn't unlocked too much. I could still only mine like trees, stone, and I think iron. Like and even when I watched like this gameplay video here, like I see so many other types of minerals and stuff like that that you can have access to later on, which would then open new buildings and whatnot. So yeah, I think it's pretty simple in that way. And I got to say, like the way they've built this up to be controller friendly is actually really good because we think of RTS as predominantly a PC genre that works really well with a mouse and keyboard. But I think the fact that it is a third person game makes it play a lot better on a controller. But also like just the way they've put the buttons in the right spots and the way they use the D-pad and things like this is actually very clever. And that I feel like I have access to everything very quickly and easily, and you can do a lot of quick movements and things like that. So I think they did a really good job of translating it over to controller. But now that I mentioned that, I am actually quite curious what this thing plays like on PC. I wonder if that would be more or less enjoyable because of the third person nature. I feel like if I was on PC, I maybe would want it to just be standard mouse and keyboard, like top down view, and
Yeah.
play through it that way. So yeah, I don't know. Seems like there's some good other options to try for this thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I feel like Minecraft's just blown up in that aspect too, of becoming more of a console thing. Obviously, it originated on PC, but when
Mm-hmm.
they had like the Xbox and PlayStation versions, like a lot of people that even were on my friends list were playing that. So I'm curious of just like the overall demographic of what type of players are
Yeah.
playing on what consoles. It's probably still PC dominant, I would imagine, but a
Well, I
lot
think
of
also like
people are on.
tablets and phones and stuff like that. Like I feel like a
Right.
huge
Yeah.
way that people, kids and stuff like that, who maybe don't have consoles or a PC, can engage with the game.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
I've, which is funny you mentioned that. Like I, played the game on PC for years and years and years, and eventually like picked it up on Switch because I wanted the portable version. I'm like, man, I
Mhm.
hate this thing with mouse and with
Yeah.
controller gamepad. Like it does just not work for me. I really like the mouse and keyboard feel for it, for the building and stuff like that, the precision and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree.
yeah. So yeah, I'll probably check out this thing a little bit more. But once again, it's just such a busy time for games that it's hard to make
Yeah.
time for everything. But yeah, once again, like I think I just wanted to hammer home that I really like what they are doing with the Minecraft IP because I think Dungeons and Legends are really interesting because like they could have done like some cheapo kart racer or something like
Right.
that, right? But instead they're like, okay, let's make a really interesting RTS that is quite unlike an RTS you've played. Maybe like it's a bit brutal legend actually, hailing back to the Xbox 360 era there in terms of that being an RTS that I think is like third person, right? In the way that kind of controls. And then Dungeons 2, which is like just not what you would expect for the first spin-off from Minecraft to be, is like a Diablo style dungeon crawler,
Yeah.
right? But it actually works like really well, and that game was quite enjoyable as well. So there you
That's
go. There's
awesome.
Minecraft Legends. With that, let's take our first break, and we'll be right back. Okay. Next up, let's talk about coffee talk. So Kirkland, do you remember? I feel like I've talked to you about the original game
Oh
before.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes. You've talked to me. I think on 2 different casts we've talked about
Okay.
Coffee Talk. You like the initial time when you got it and we're talking about it, and then I can't remember if there was like a DLC or something that came out, and you're kind of doing an update on Coffee Talk, and it's been on my wish list. I always see it go on sale, but I haven't gone over that ridge and bitten that bullet. But it's
Yeah.
really interesting concept. I love the art style, and you've talked about just the different characters that you come across are really really awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious what the second time I would have talked about the game was because there was definitely never a DLC that I remember, and
Maybe
I feel
it
like
was
I played
just in
through the game in
anticipation
like
for
a
the
week or
second.
something. It might have been that. It might have been that. But yeah, this is they call it Coffee Talk Episode 2, Hibiscus and Butterfly. I think is what the full title is. But I think the really important part there is that they call this Episode 2. This really does feel like what is very much set up to be a nice episodic kind of series, and I think this is a game that you definitely need to play the first one before you go into this. So for anyone who doesn't know, because this is still smaller indie game, Coffee Talk is the name of the coffee shop that you own. You play as the barista, and people come in and you make them a drink, coffee. I think funny enough, like even though this is called Coffee Talk, the big thing they're adding in the sequel is like a bunch of new tea options, which I think is kind of a goofy thing. And then you just have these conversations. So I'd say it's primarily a visual novel. Second to that would be like these very basic kind of mechanics of making coffee and tea, which is a bit of like a puzzle of like someone will ask for a certain thing, or I'll say an uncertain thing. They'll just be like, I'm kind of feeling this sort of vibe, and you have to figure out which ingredients to combine to make that specific vibe. Or sometimes they'll just ask outright for the thing, or they'll say, hey, just surprise me with something, you do that. But I would not call this a simulator of like a coffee making simulator. It's definitely not to that degree. Once again, visual novel forward in that way. But yeah, to your point, the art style, I love the pixel art of this game. Is very, I take a lot of inspiration from it, as doing a lot of pixel art these days. And the music too, it's like the classic like lo-fi, beats to chill to, that kind of thing. It's really really nice. It just puts you in a nice headspace. The coffee shop, for whatever reason, like is only open in nighttime, so it's always dark outside. It's often like raining, and people come in, and there's like a very just chill kind of vibe to the game overall. And I think that's why you play this thing, is for those chill vibes. Once again, this is episode 2. You absolutely should play the first one. It immediately is talking about character, and like the first character you talk to is a big character from the first game, and you could probably infer what's going on if you just played this one. But like immediately he's like asking you about someone from the first game, and you're like, oh yeah, she's off doing some traveling right now, which I think is their way to kind of like write her off for this game, like she probably won't be around. But like I don't know, I like the little nod. And then in the second day, like a couple more people from the first game come along, and they're talking to you and all that stuff. So I've still only a couple nights into this thing, so I've only played a little bit, but I think the first game was pretty short, and I imagine this one is too. And that's why I would love if they could get, and this is unrealistic, but I would love if they could get the production time on this to a point where they could just release a new episode like every year. I think that would be amazing for this thing. Just like, some new characters, but a lot of just those recurring characters, hearing what's going on, updates on their life. And once again, I also really have no idea how long this is after the first one. It's unclear to me if it's like a month has gone by, 2 months. I don't think it's a year, but it's not just like a couple days. Like it's not an immediate sequel either. So that's something that slightly confuses me too. But I'm really enjoying it so far. It's more of the same, but I love that first game for what it was, and so I'm enjoying it for that. I'm not going to say worried, because that's probably too much of an overstatement, but like one of the first main new characters, he seems like a main character because he's like in the box art for the game. I'm like not loving his vibe so far. I'm like, I don't know if I want this guy at my coffee shop all the time, but he like shows up on the first day, and then the second day he's like the first guy there too, and he's just like kind of an influencer, like over the top kind of guy, and he's like shit talking you because he's like, there's no Wi-Fi here, and like, there's no one talking about your coffee shop online and all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, okay, this guy doesn't really fit the vibe of like what I'm trying to go for here. And maybe he's right on some points, but I don't know. So we'll see if he grows on me. There's a couple of characters like that in the first game too that maybe could be a bit abrasive or something like that, but they kind of became endearing after a while too. So we'll see about that. Mechanically, this game's like almost the exact same. Like I mentioned, there's some new T's that they throw in there, but like mechanically, it's all the exact same. There's like one new thing too, which is like you can like give people gifts, which I don't even know what that's supposed to do yet, but it actually feels a bit like Papers, Please, that you can like hand people stuff, and even like it almost looks kind of identical to the way you do it. It's kind of weird in that way. I just got an achievement ping sound in my headphones. I think Muds is playing something on my Xbox, and I just got a notification, which is very funny.
Getting some gamer score.
Which is actually a good reminder that this game, the sequel, is on Game Pass. So I've played the first game on Switch, and it actually is a very perfect Switch game. But just because this is on Game Pass, I'm like, wow, I'm subscribed. I might as well play it on Xbox. So I'm playing it on the big screen rather than just like handheld and stuff like that. And so I think, it's weird because yes, this is on Game Pass, and I recommend it, and it's a great way to play through it. But like, you should go play the first one, and I don't think the first one is on. Maybe it is, and I just haven't downloaded it because I already played the game or something like that. But yeah, I would definitely recommend once again to go back to that first one. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to say about this game. I guess one other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is in the first game, one of the characters is like a budding game developer. And she's talking about the trials and tribulations of like trying to create her game and the creative process, and then like trying to find an audience for the game. And I think I talked to you about this. This is now sounding familiar.
Sounds familiar.
I really liked that character in particular because I felt like it was very much the developers like talking to the audience in that way and like sharing what it is their experience like as a developer. And like Coffee Talk was their first, bigger indie hit kind of thing like that. And so I liked that element of it. I thought that was really cool. And that character pops up in the second day again, and she's like still working on her game and stuff like that. And then immediately she's like, man, I just got like this offer from this publisher that I really like. And like this offer just sucked. It has the worst terms. She like goes into detail of like, here's why this offer sucked from this publisher. And I was like, man, is this like them talking about an offer that they got from a publisher? I'm like, Xbox, like, I don't think Xbox published this, but like it is on Game Pass. Or like, are they talking about the contract from Xbox, but like they still went? Like, I'm so curious if that is actually them referring to anything, or if that's now fiction, or maybe I was just making up in that first game too. Maybe that was all fiction and not really how they felt about it. But I feel like they are probably inferring their own feelings on game development and stuff. So I don't know. I don't even know who the publisher is. I think it's Toge Productions, I think, is the developer. I don't know if they have a different publisher this time around, but I thought that element of it was pretty funny too. That stood out to me.
It'd be such a great way to like, or a great like outlet for that, because nobody can prove for or against that's real, But I mean, if it seems very authentic and real, they're probably pulling from reality, at least in some aspects. But yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, she's like talking about it a little bit, and she's like, I don't really want to say too much. But then her friend's like, you didn't sign the NDA yet. You can like talk about this all you want. She's like, okay, I'll share a little bit. So once again, some of that stuff felt a little on the nose in a way that I enjoyed.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like a nice, just cute, warm game that you can just, especially if the episodes, like you said, in a perfect world would just come out yearly. It's just like the special Coffee Talk time of the year. Get a nice cozy blanket of tea and just sit down and play some Coffee Talk on a rainy day. Exactly. Sounds very nice.
Yeah.
What's like the length of these games? Have you beaten the second one already?
No, I'm only on the second night of the second, just because once again, Advanced Wars, Minecraft Legends, I'm playing a lot of stuff this weekend. But yeah, the first one was, I think it was like 4 or 5 hours or something like that. Okay, maybe 6. And I remember after I beat it, I was like, man, that was a bit too short. Like I wanted like a little tiny bit more. So obviously, I'm glad that it got a sequel, but that's where I maybe feel like it'd be nice if this was like a yearly or even more often thing, because it's like, okay, it's a pretty short experience. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe they can get the pipeline down with like mechanics are pretty much the same. Visuals are largely the same. And they're just adding in new dialogue and character art and stuff like that. So maybe they could get the production time down on it or something like that. But yeah, I'm imagining this game is going to be about the same. And then there's like an endless mode, I think, where it's more about like the mechanics of making coffee and stuff like that. So we'll see how that goes. But then yeah, there's also, you also have your phone where you have your contacts of the different people that come into your shop, and that's where you can like figure out hints. Like I think that's maybe a newish feature that I haven't really seen yet, but I'm sure it's going to be part of it, where like someone will post something on social media which could like give you a hint as to what to make them when they come into the shop the next time and stuff like that. So we'll see how those mechanics go in terms of making it a bit more puzzly, without being too overt with the puzzleness. So yeah, we'll see how that goes once again. But yeah, not too much new here, just more of the same, but more of the same is good for what this series is at this point.
It's awesome.
And I guess we can just go right into Advance Wars. So Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. I guess a quick history here is that Advance Wars was a series that started on the Game Boy Advance. Originally, it was Intelligent Systems who does Fire Emblem, and this was like them making a different type of tactics game. I imagine at that point they were not burnt out, but like, okay, let's try something else. Like Fire Emblem is kind of, it is what it is now, and we have to make these games somewhat similar with a couple new things each time. But like, let's make Advance Wars. It's once again turn-based. It's on a grid and all that stuff. But like, let's completely change the mechanics otherwise, like from the ground up sort of thing. And so there was 2 games on the Game Boy Advance, and then I think 2 more on the DS. And this is essentially we'll say remake remaster of those first 2 games bundled into one on the Switch. So the graphics are all new, and it's kind of got like instead of that pixel art that the GBA had, this has more of it looks like very Toy Soldier ish, and it's kind of like a cardboard cutout map, right? Like it seems like one of those, like, when you're planning out a war and the different moves and stuff like that. It seems like that's kind of the aesthetic they're going for here. But because it's like Toy Soldiers, it's like kind of kitty and goofy and colorful and bright and all that stuff. Sorry about that. And then, so yeah, I haven't actually played Advance Wars before. It's always been on my backlog because, of course, I love Fire Emblem. I love tactics games, Triangle Strategy, Midnight Suns were 2 of my favorite games last year. Into the Breach, we both love that. That's an amazing tactics game as well.
Oh, yeah.
But I think most relevantly was Wargroove, which is another indie game that came out a few years ago now. And that pretty much just like ripped off Advance Wars. Like it was exactly what Advance Wars is, that formula. And so this actually does feel very familiar for me, even though I've never played the original Advance Wars. And it's going well so far. Once again, it is very much like Wargroove, so it's kind of what I've played before in a way, but it is solid, and I can see why people love this series and have been excited for it to come back. Have you seen any gameplay of this thing? Do you know what this game looks like?
Yeah, I think we covered it on a previous side quest. I think it was on a Nintendo Direct showcase or something, and that's where you're kind of giving your thoughts that you preferred the more GBA pixel art style as opposed to this newer cardboard cartoony aesthetic. But I thought it looked really cool. It's definitely just the tactics formula, which I really love in games. And yeah, I don't know. I think it was just something where it wasn't showing me enough that I really wanted to get over the buying hump, and because I already have Fire Emblem that I haven't beaten, but like still just plugging hours into. Got Midnight Sun still on the horizon, as well as just the other one. So
Into the Breach,
Into the Breach, yes, thank you.
Play that forever.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm excited to hear your thoughts on it because it looked really cute and fun. I really like that Toy Soldier aesthetic for sure. But yeah. I gotta say I've become more positive on the aesthetics of it now that I have actually played it myself. I still like if they went above and beyond and had in the options a way to go to the pixel art style of it, which of course then the resolution would be different because the GBA had like, I forget what that pixel art is, but it's essentially like a 3x4 kind of resolution. So obviously there'd have to be a lot more work they'd have to do there. But they didn't go above and beyond in that way. That's fine. That is maybe one of my complaints here right off the bat, is that there's literally just not an options menu in this game. And I felt like there's a few things I would love to customize. Like when you're in game, you can like change a couple things. Like you can turn off battle animations and like turn the sound off. But I don't even think there's a way to turn like music versus effects down or anything. There's just no options menu whatsoever, which is
very
Brutal.
weird, and it feels like, especially for a remake or a remaster, like I don't know what the original Advance Wars was like, but that feels like, come on, this is a AAA modern game. You're charging $80 for this. Like, you should have the ability to change some
Yeah.
options around in some way. So that was one thing that stood out to me. I think another thing too is I was pretty on the fence of terms of, do I want to buy this? Like, it is pretty expensive. And I actually, the thing that made it more palatable for me was the vouchers that we talked about from that same Nintendo Direct, which is that buy the voucher, and then you can get 2 Nintendo games, and essentially for us Canadian, we're saving about $30 between those 2 games. And I'm like, I'm getting Tears of the Kingdom here. If I get the voucher and get these 2 games, then I can essentially get this game for like $15 cheaper. And that to me felt right at that point. Here's 2 games from the GBA, which is an era of games that I really love. I always want to play these games. That price feels right. So I think the timing of, originally when this game was supposed to come out 1 year ago, the vouchers didn't exist, but now they do, and that actually makes it a lot easier for me to grab a purchase on this thing. So I guess let's talk about some of these mechanics here, because I think you'll like getting into the weeds on some of these things. But
absolutely.
So some of I think maybe the main difference between this and Triangle Strategy, Fire Emblem, Midnight Suns, all those kinds of games, is that you don't have like a named character. You don't have like, here's Marth, or here's, Venom or something like that. Instead, you have just like, okay, maybe you start a level and you'll have 3 tanks, a medium tank, maybe an artillery, a helicopter, something like that. And these are not named units, and it really, like, it doesn't matter how many of them die, or it doesn't matter which ones live, to see the end of the battle and all that stuff. Instead, it's more about like, okay, you're buying new units. So I'm buying more tanks with the currency that I have, buying more helicopters and stuff like that. And in that way, it is supposed to be more of a war where you're fighting, that these fronts are going back and forth. You're trying to take these different buildings so that you can use those for extra defense, and that's where you can heal up and stuff as well. And so you're trying to take different parts of the map strategically going. And I think ideally it is supposed to be this back and forth of like, you take this area, these like mountains or something like that, and then the enemy comes back with a big army, and a bit like an RTS in that sort of way too, actually amassing a big army, taking out a certain zone and stuff like that. And I think maybe one of the things that works best, and one of the things that makes this speed up a bit, and sometimes Fire Emblem, like sometimes the end of the level, the last few turns can be pretty slow, where you're just taking out stragglers or just fighting a boss or something like that, is that there are 2 win conditions. Either you can take out all the enemy units, or you can take out the enemy headquarters. And the headquarters is pretty easy to take out. You just have to get an infantry unit on it and to stand there for 2 turns. And then you take it, and then it doesn't matter how many units there is on the map. You'll get the win at that point. And then obviously you have a headquarters as well, so you have to make sure you're always defending that. So the map design is kind of mixed, where sometimes the HQ is so like in the back corner, and there's a million enemies around it. So there's really no way you can get to the HQ without just taking all the units anyway. But then other times the enemy HQ will be off, like kind of in the middle of nowhere, and you can almost just race there, take out the HQ, and just almost ignore what the rest of their battle is doing, or just like kind of distract them while you go and take out the HQ. And so I really like that element of the game, because I think it adds a good variety. It makes it so you feel like you can kind of cheese it a little bit, but then the maps are also designed in a way that's like you're able to kind of win in these different ways, and like it takes advantage of that in I think a way that's pretty well done. And then there's also like the classic fog of war is, I'd say, more common in this than it is in like a Fire Emblem, and that makes it tricky too, where you don't know where the enemy units are and stuff like that.
Do you think they balance the levels in a good way to make it so more often than not both options are viable, or it's like extremely obvious which method is the just maximize efficiency way to go about it?
I think it's, once again, those fog of war maps, right? When you have no idea how many enemies are left or where they are, on those ones it feels like, okay, well, I'm just going to go for the HQ, because you can always see where the HQ is on the map, and so it feels like more obvious. It really does feel like they have an intended way for you to beat each level so far. I'm on like mission 14 or 15, I think, at this point. So I've done a good amount of missions. And yeah, each one does feel like there is an intended way that you're supposed to beat this thing, whether it's like rush for this HQ that's off in the middle of nowhere, or this HQ is so tucked away that you're going to have to fight almost everyone anyway. You might as well just fight everyone at that point. So I'd say it's mixed on that way. And then I think maybe another big criticism I have so far is that the enemy AI is really just kind of pretty dumb so far. There's 2 difficulties. There's a casual and classic. And so I'm playing on classic. And then I think when you beat the whole campaign, you unlock a harder mode. But I'm curious if the harder mode is just like enemy stats and there's more enemies, because I can't imagine they're like much smarter, but maybe they are just smarter too. But I feel like it's pretty easy to cheese it, where, for example, there's one mission where there's like a bridge that essentially acts as like a bottleneck on this level. And I had one unit there, and then the enemy unit, I got them down to like 4 health. And I noticed that when they're at 4 health, they will not back away to go heal, but they also will not instigate an attack on my unit. So he was just standing in this one spot, essentially blocking the rest of his team. And then I could just set up like some artillery and just fire all day long, take out the rest of the units that were like bottled all around there. And then like, I don't know, it just felt like a cakewalk. And so it felt like what should be a challenging mission. I just felt like I kind of cheesed it. And that's because the enemy AI was just stupid. Like that unit should have just moved out of the way or sacrificed themselves so that another one could move in. And so obviously that's on me to an extent. But at the same time, you kind of expect that the AI would be a little bit smarter. And of course, I'm coming into this from being like an expert in the genre. I've played so many of these games that some of these tactics might seem a bit obvious, but something that maybe I hope later in the game or when I get hard mode that I can get a bit more challenge out of some of the things that are going on here. But yeah, let's talk about some other mechanics here. So one of the big things is that you can buy new units, right? Normally in tactics games, you pick your units beforehand, you go into the level, you maybe pick their position, then that's who you have for the level, and maybe in the level you'll find a new unit or two that joins your party or something like that. But instead in this, sometimes there will be a certain building, and then you're accumulating money based on how many of these like territories you've claimed, essentially these different buildings you've claimed, and then you can buy new units to add to your army. And it doesn't seem like there is a limit to how many you can have. I don't see a tracker on screen that's like, 15 of 20 or anything like that. So I don't know if there is a limit to a point. Once you have so many units, I guess it'd be like, you're just going to win anyway. So I wonder if you can like crash the game by just getting so many units. Oh, that'd be funny if you can cheese it in that way. And these are obviously placed in very specific spots too, in terms of not being like super aggressive placements and stuff like that. But then you can like take an enemy's spawning building and then they couldn't spawn more, and then you could spawn them from that location. So there's some cool tactics there. And then I think that works pretty well because they introduce things like that. Like they'll introduce that building that buys units, but then they'll still have a bunch of chapters that don't have that building in there. So it is very specifically designed of like, this is how many units you have for this mission. That's how many your enemy has, and like accomplish this goal. Sometimes it's like, I just got to survive for 5 turns. Sometimes it is like, get the or it's either get the HQ or take it the enemy unit. So I feel like they are doing a good job of introducing a mechanic and then like not just making that the game from that point on. They still, rinse and repeat. They take things out, they add some other mechanics in, and just add some good variety there. So even if it's a bit easy, I feel like in terms of the tactics you're having to employ, I feel like they are asking you to figure out a lot of different problems, which is a good thing.
Do they like is like how many units different variations would there be? Because in Fire Emblem you got your archer, cavalier, all those, and then like subgenre classes and stuff like that. Is there a wide range of that where you can maybe employ like a certain play style? Like I'm just an artillery guy, so I just focus all my units on that aspect, or big tanks guy, something like that. Is there like radar type units that like only apply buffs or support the rest of the team?
Yeah, that's one thing I'm really enjoying is I feel like there is a good variety. It's enough variety that you have different tactics and they can start you with different stuff at the beginning of a level, and you have to learn how these units are, and each one of them are like strong against certain units, like artillery are good against tanks, or bombers are really good against like these certain ground units and stuff like that. And so you got to learn like it has that similar like weapon triangle element to it, though it doesn't phrase it in the same way. But I think the variety is pretty good. You have a good variety of just like tanks, and then there's the medium tanks. You have a couple different variations there, a couple types of infantry units. It seems like for each type there's like a couple different slight variations. One's a bit stronger and more expensive, that sort of thing. But then to your point, like there is a recon unit, which I love. It's like a little Hummer. It's so cute with this chibi art style, and that just has like huge range for Fog of War levels. So that's like ideal on those levels because it can see so much, but it dies really quick to like tanks. But then it's like pretty good against infantry. So it's still interesting the way it factors into the difficulty of these levels. And then in terms of like there is air units you get eventually, and then there's like water units too, and then obviously the most interesting levels are the ones that factor all these, huge
Right.
ground areas with water, with air units, and all of those have different strengths and weaknesses against other things. You have like grounded anti-air units that those factor in. You have transport units that like pick up and move units around the map, but it can only move certain units. And then with that too is there's like both fuel and ammo in this game. So fuel is like, I guess each time you move or each turn you just like use up some fuel by default, and then if you like stop a turn on a city of yours, you can like refuel. And then you also have ammo, which kind of works in the same way that Fire Emblem has like weapon durability, I guess. But then you have this one unit who can go around and like give fuel and ammo to your units, or your units can go back to your cities and like refuel there. So you do have a good variety of like, some units are just straight up not meant to attack. They're just either there. Often you use them to like just block. Like, okay, this recon, I've already seen what I need to see. Now I'm just going to put it on this bridge, and it's going to like take a turn for me as like this tank has to blast through it before it can get to my, the second line of defense that I have. So there are some good units in that way too that you can use as almost like sacrifices in that way.
That makes it, I feel like nicer for me, because too many times in Fire Emblem I get too attached to a character. It's like, got to reload a save because my one tank that's just doing his job, and he should be just sacrificing himself for the rest of the units. But, I'm too attached to him, so I have to reload the save. But knowing that this is, there is no named units, you can be a more ruthless leader, if that's the best word to choose there.
No, I mean, I think that's a thing largely, like all tactics games, is that like your units dying is either like, okay, I'm going to restart, I'm going to load a save, or it's just like such a huge consequence. But that's what I like about the Advance Wars Wargroove formula, is that that's just not really how it's designed at all. And that it makes for like such a different type of tactic game that's like less, I don't know, sometimes it's going to be kind of like monotonous or annoying to like do those resets. And we've talked about this before with Fire Emblem. There's multiple games where I was like on a really hard mission, 2 hours in, I lost a unit, and then I just like never played the game again, never finished it. Whereas I don't think that would happen in Advance Wars. You can also like, let's say a tank has 5 health, another one of your tanks has 5 health. You can like combine them into one because they are the same type.
Right.
So that's a cool element too, though. Like in Fire Emblem, you wouldn't really get an equivalent like that. So that's a cool new thing that comes out because of it.
For sure. What's like the scale of these maps too? Are they very comparable to Fire Emblem? I know Fire Emblem, certain maps might be like a gully, so you're very limited in how, I don't know, certain characters can traverse on it.
Right.
But I feel like most of the time the levels are a similar type size. Are these a lot bigger, a lot smaller, or very variant?
Yeah, definitely variant, where most of the first 5, 6, 7 levels are kind of like one screen. You can see the whole thing pretty much in your view and all that. And then there's like mountains and trees, and those kind of things slow you down. And like something like a tank can't go up on top of a mountain, but then infantry units can, or obviously planes can go anywhere they want. But I think when you're talking about those maps that have larger like ocean sequences, as well as ground area, as well as just like some mountainous area, they can get pretty big at times. And even looking through, there's like custom maps you can do for custom battles online and stuff like that. And some of those look like massive. And so I don't know what the limit is, but even when you scroll out on the map, like there's obviously a lot of space that it is allowing this camera to zoom out to, which I imagine means like that's kind of what the capacity is. So some of them can get pretty massive, and I'm curious to see how the pacing of those go, because so far each level's taken me like, I don't know, at most like 20, 25 minutes or something like that, which is a lot shorter than when I think about any other game in the genre on those later levels. So we'll see if this cranks up the length too. But once again, because sometimes like taking an HQ is so quick and you can kind of race there and not fight all these units, I feel like that also just makes it so it can speed along a little quicker than equivalent games in the genre.
Right. You said too, because this is a remake remaster of 1 and 2 Advance Wars. Have you played both of them, or is it a combined type thing where they just it's like one big game?
I'm curious about that, and I should have looked into it, and maybe I will, and then I can talk about this on Switch Heads when I go over there tomorrow. But so I started with 1, and it says like Advance Wars, when you like, go play a game, it's like, which game do you want to play? You can choose which one, and it says like Advance Wars 2 will unlock once you've played 1. But then I clicked on it, and you can start it. It's just like really incentivizing you, like, go play 1 first, go finish that, and then come to this. But I think if you are like a big fan of these games, you've played them before, maybe you wouldn't care about that, and like, I'll just jump in.
Yeah.
And so I don't really care, like story wise. In like half an hour, I'm like, I don't care about, like, this is not very well written. I don't really care about this overarching story going on here. So I think I might jump into 2 just to see what happens, because I also feel like too the tutorial seemed like it was done outside of either of those games campaign. It was just like
Oh,
before
okay.
that, and then obviously when there's a new mechanic, they'll quickly tutorialize that in an individual level. But I imagine Advance Wars 2 then is going to like maybe even chop out some of those early levels of the game and just like really get you into the thick of it. Here's the new mechanics. Here's some bigger,
Yeah.
more intense levels and stuff like that, because this is a package and you're kind of incentivized to play through one first.
Yeah.
So I hope it does that. At very least, I think it'll probably chop out any tutorial stuff for the second one, because it's probably going to be very much the same and maybe just a few new units. And I'm actually really curious what the new mechanics are in the sequel. So I'll have to
Yeah.
report back to you on that when I get to it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's why I brought it up, because I was curious just how differently they play. I know in certain games that they've done remaster of like a collection of games. Sometimes people have very heavy preferences for maybe like 2 of 3. When you go back on one,
Yes,
it's like
yes.
it's just so dated. Like it's not even worth playing it at this point. It is cool that it's in there, but most people would probably play the later one. I would also think that if they don't just chop out all those tutorial aspects of the second game, if you have played the first one, at least like make it an option, even if that wasn't in the original game. I feel like it's pretty necessary if big chunk of the population that buys this game is probably going to play the first one first, and then you go into the second one, you have to go through, because I know those tactics tutorials, sometimes they are required, especially if it's maybe your first tactics game, but a lot of them, they just play very similarly, so going through those early levels are very tedious sometimes, of
Yeah.
select your character and move them here. It's like, oh my gosh, I've done this
Force
so many
movements.
times.
Yeah, that's something that I don't know if this is, once again, because I haven't played the original, I can't speak on this as a remake thing, but I think one thing they have done that's really good is the first like 3 levels tutorial, I think it does ask you if you've played Advance Wars before, actually. And so if you say no, I'm guessing you can maybe skip some of that, so that is good. But I have to go back and check. But then there is certain elements where like, okay, in this level, it's introducing bombers and like anti-air units or something like that. And it's like, do you need a refresher on how this works? And it asks you that all like often for new mechanics. So I think that's good. There's a couple times where I'm like, yeah, I don't remember how this works. And there's a couple things where I'm like, okay, I think I understand how this unit works, so I'm going to skip this. So it seems like they are piecemealing the tutorial based on like when new stuff comes into the game, but then you can opt out of a lot of it as you're going along. Now, I'm sure if you're someone who played the originals, it would be great if you could go into an options menu, if that existed, and just turn off all tutorials, and it would just immediately skip all that dialogue and just get you right into the fray. But either way, the dialogue's like not part of this. This is not like how Fire Emblem these days is like half battles, half RPG talking and stuff like that. This is like 95% battles, 5% like other stuff. Like it's really just mostly about the tactics element of it. Another thing too is with this game is you have different COs, so that I think just commanding officers is what they're supposed to stand for. And essentially each one of these, and your enemy will always have one too. This is not necessarily the boss of the level, because once again, you don't have, Marth in the level or anything like that. But each one of them like will affect the stats of your units slightly, and then they all have like a power up ability that once you do enough movements, take out enough units, you build up this power ability that you can use. And so where I'm at in the game now, for almost every level, I can like choose between these COs that I've unlocked. I have 3 of them now. And then I know you can buy other ones and use them in auxiliary battles, or I assume in online and stuff like that. And then each of like I mentioned, the enemies have a different CO too. And so I actually really like this, because I feel like it changes a lot, where one of the units I have, he has like just higher damage and defense essentially, but then he just has less range. And so it's like, man, some of these levels, like how did they design them to be balanced around like, if you can't even, don't have enough range to attack over this mountain chain, how would you do this level? It's like a very interesting element to it. But then like you have obviously just more power. And then most of the time I'm just using Andy, who's like the default main character guy. And he just like, his CO power is that he just heals everyone a little bit. And then he just like gets a slight stat boost and stuff like that. So it's like just a good classic one to use. But then the other character, Sammy, that I got, she can like capture areas quicker. So that's like an interesting element to it. And then some of the enemies, like one of them has like, he's like a sniper essentially, so all of his units just have a lot more range. And that's made some of those levels like especially challenging, because normally if you have like an artillery setup looking at each other, they can fire at each other. But in this, the way these levels are set up and this guy's ability, he's going to be able to reach over this area that you can't fight him back on. So it makes for some like really interesting challenges. And then I think that's something that would be really good for online battles. I don't know how much I'll get into those. and then like custom maps, bonus maps, auxiliary battles, and just messing around with these different things. But one critique I have to throw once again with that is that you're going into a level and it's asking you which character you want to pick, but like it doesn't give you a preview of what the level looks like. So you have to like pick the way I almost want to see is like I want to see the level before I choose who I want, because maybe like this guy's lack of range will just totally fuck me over. So I don't want to play him. But then you have to like load into the level, then quit out to the menu, and then discard that save game, start the level again, pick your CO again. So once again, like a lot of quality of life things are just kind of missing in this. And once again, maybe it's very, accurate to what the original game was like, but I really wish there was some more like AAA modern day conveniences thrown on top of it. And maybe I'm bad. Maybe there's a button to like preview or something, but like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like there is. So that's one thing as well. But I do like the variety of the COs, and I feel like Wargroove did this all right. And where like each commander had like a special move or something like that. But I think this is like a bit of a better way to do it. And I quite like, this element to it. It changes the game quite a bit, really, depending on which CO you choose to have for each mission, which is it's actually pretty surprising how much they really change like the strategy what you have access to. So it's a pretty cool feature.
Yeah, absolutely. Replayability, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then I guess maybe the last thing I'll shout out here is that, mostly I'm playing Advance Wars 1 and I'm going through the campaign. So I've not experienced too much of the overall package, but as I mentioned, once you do that, when you complete that, you can unlock a hard mode. So I will be checking that out because I want to see what this would be like with more difficulty options. But then there's also online. There are auxiliary maps you can unlock. There's a shop you can go to with the currency you earn from the campaign. You can buy different COs. You can buy music tracks, gallery stuff, and you can also buy bonus maps. So it seems like there's a lot of good stuff you can get there. So I'm excited to check out some of that stuff. There's also a map builder. You can make your own maps and whatnot, which is something, once again, that Wargroove had. Although one thing I've seen, and I need to confirm this for myself, is that it seems like you cannot download random people's maps. You can only download like people from your friends list who have made maps, which sucks because once again, Wargroove had this, but you could download anyone's maps. And I remember downloading all sorts of weirdo, crazy maps. People made like RPGs in that game because of how you could like add cutscenes and stuff like that. Map editor was insanely good, and so it definitely feels like a step down for Wargroove, this like small indie game who's like trying to be like Advance Wars, to do that element of this like miles better than this remake did, especially because that's years after Wargroove even came out at this point. So I know Wargroove 2 is announced and it's coming out at some point, and I'm sure that map builder will just be even bigger and better than it was in that first game. So that's a critique, but once again, I have not dove completely into the online and some of that stuff, but I'll check out once again all that stuff before that Switch Heads review. So a good place to go get a second opinion. I'll have played some more before that. So yeah, absolutely. I'll check that out to hear some questions that you couldn't answer here, with the second game features and all that jazz. Yeah, and I David and Patrick over there will also have played the game, and maybe they'll have checked out more of these features as well that I haven't. So I'm sure they'll have some good insights there as well. Kirklin, any other questions on Advance Wars? I guess, to speak on a recommendation of this, for me with the voucher, the price, it seems right. I haven't gotten through all of it yet, but it seems like even with some of the iffy stuff with online, it seems like there's a lot here, even just for these two campaigns. Cool. Like, I just love Game Boy Advance era, so to have this on the Switch feels really cool. I'm into it. I'd love to see them bring those DS games over, though I understand with the double screens that is more work in terms of how you port that kind of thing. Yeah. But like Kirklin, like you would love this game. I know it's expensive, so it might be hard for you to justify, but I feel like this is definitely a U game, and I think for people who, if you like Wargroove, obviously you're going to like this. If you're playing Wargroove, you probably know Advance Wars. But I think if you're a Fire Emblem, or you play Midnight Suns, or you're like Into the Breach and you want something kind of different, this is definitely a lot different than those kind of tactics games. I can't really think of another game other than once again Wargroove that is quite like this. So it's really, really great. Really enjoying it. Yeah, I was going to say my favorite feature from this is the fact that, like you said, it's like 95% just combat, 5% of the story. No so if there's aspects when I'm playing those tactics games and I just want to play the strategy element and do some wars, but maybe you're going through, like sometimes it's like 20 minutes of cutscenes and dialogues before you actually get to like the next battle. Maybe it's a really quick battle, then you go through like another and it's like optimal. Like you got to do that stuff to level up and whatnot. Right? So you don't want to ignore it. Yeah. No, exactly. It's like, I got to go through all this to level up my certain characters, get their support levels up. Go to the arena, yeah. All that jazz, which can take a lot of time. So sometimes I just want to do the combat, and this sounds exactly the
like that, which is really cool. Unfortunately, I'm not at like a drought for tactics games right now. You know,
You're in a good spot.
I still got to jump back into Midnight Suns, but definitely can see myself trying this in the future.
Awesome. Okay, good stuff. Kirkland, thank you for joining me. A little short and sweet,
Yeah.
fun side quest here. Next week, we'll have a Zelda ranking for you from me, and then Star Wars Jedi Survivor at some point, and then Redfall just right after that. And then, of course, Prey hitting the feeds here, Prey retrospective. Very excited about it. I've not heard Travis talk about it yet. I'm very curious if he...
Forgot he was on that, actually.
I know, he's supposed to be.
Excited.
I don't even know if he's played it. I got to check in with him. I'll talk to him when we're doing Bo is Afraid and see how that's going. But Kirkland, thank you for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
See you later.